So, greetings. Welcome to Reading Redux. This is my new BookTube channel. A lot of trepidation here. Something that I've thought about doing for a while. Been doing a lot of procrastinating, trying to get everything just right. And, the more channels that I have watched, especially when they address starting out, pretty uniformly say, don't do that. Don't stress out. Don't try to make everything perfect. Just start doing it. So here we go. So my name is John. I've always loved reading. However, the time that I've dedicated and devoted to reading for pleasure has really fluctuated greatly over the course of my life, as I'm sure it has for many others. But I've kind of feel like I've recently gotten my reading groove back, and I've been yearning for some way to share experiences and hopefully build some community, however small. So whether this kind of describes your journey and that's why you're here, or whether you're friend or family and checking it out, welcome. Even if you're here just because you like to discuss books, or get recommendations or give recommendations, welcome. I'm really glad that you're able to join me. So yeah, I mean, I'm gonna not to show off my mad skills in data visualization, but I'll put up a very precise and accurate plot of my my reading journey. And what you can see is I had a love for reading at an early age. That fell off during college. I mean, reading for pleasure because you're doing so much required academic work. And then picked up again, right after college, where in part I started reading some of the books that I was supposed to have read in college, thinking that, maybe those wise literature professors who seem to know everything about Western literature maybe had some good recommendations. And that turned out to be true. So I read some really impressive works of literature for myself, and really enjoyed that immensely. And then worked for a while. Went to grad school. During grad school, after my coursework was finished, started picking up books again and reading for pleasure again. One of my good friends in grad school, shout out to Pete if he sees this, has the same love for reading, and I don't think he's ever went into the same kind of slump that I did. But we really enjoyed comparing notes or giving each other recommendations for reading, which I really enjoyed. And that's part of the reason why I wanted to be able to talk about books. And then, life happens. You start a family, you start a career, you buy a home that you have to invest a significant amount of time in. And, you're just, you're busy and you're tired, and, reading for pleasure kind of falls by the wayside. And so I never stopped reading, but, there were times where I read very few books in the course of a year, and never stopped enjoying reading, just never seemed to be able to sort of really get back to it, sort of full throttle. Then of course there was, we're in the age of, the internet, smartphones, social media, lots of streaming, passive content. And I think that has monopolized a lot of our time. I could certainly speak for myself there. And, again, it's a lot of times it comes down to choices, right? And choosing how to spend your free time. So what got me back into reading? I thought I'd share in case you're sort of tired of being in a reading slump and are hoping to get out of it. I think, the key is finding a work or works that really grip you, keep you engaged, and they get you beyond the sort of sporadic start and stop pattern that's probably plagued you for far too long. Lots of books on my shelves that still have old bookmarks sitting on, page 50, because that's as far as I got. And so for me, it was just happened to be reading Gene Wolfe, who was a very talented science fiction author, sort of an author's author. I enjoy reading fiction primarily. Once in a while, I read nonfiction, but I mostly enjoy reading fiction, literary fiction, science or speculative fiction, classics. I don't particularly mind books that take some work and require really careful reading. And in fact, I quite enjoy that if it's something that that pulls me in. I'm kind of inspired and impressed by ideas and craft. So the quality of writing. So, even if an author's character development and or, the intricacies of plot are not really a strength in a particular novel, I can still enjoy it if I enjoy the craft, the ideas, the inventiveness of the narrative. And don't get me wrong, I love highly developed characters and plot lines, also. But I don't just look for that exclusively when in the fiction that I choose to read. It was making my way through the Book of the New Sun by Gene Wolfe, and was just kind of floored by how it was crafted and everything that went into it. And it was just I thought it was remarkable. Not for everyone. Even if you're a science fiction reader, it's not for everyone. But that's what kind of pulled me in. And then I read something else by him, and then I read other books, and I just, now I'm back in the mode where, as soon as I finish a book, I've got at least one more lined up behind it. So this is an introduction. Obviously, this reflects my interests and preferences, but the real lesson here is to find a book or books that get you excited about reading or reading again. So try to find recommendations for books that seem like they'd be right up your alley. I've started using the story graph, which is kind of like Goodreads, less big corporate in terms of ownership and direction. And I find that they have the descriptive tags that they have for books can be really helpful, because things can be not just sort of out of 5-star ratings, but descriptive tags like fast paced or reflective or strong character development or weak or moderate or mixed or something. So you can get a little bit more than just a plot synopsis to give you some suggestions. The other thing I think is to make time for reading. So, this is going to mean swapping out other things that are part of your daily habits, like doom scrolling, for example. So yeah, but start making reading during those times part of your daily routine. I think daily is kind of important because if you think about most of your habits, a lot of them are daily habits. I get up in the morning, take the dog out, and make coffee. I sit down, I watch cable news. Cycle through the three same stories every 10 minutes. Instead of doing that, open up your book and read a little bit before you have to get on with your day. Yeah. So I think also making a place or places for reading, I think that's also important, right? You want to be comfortable for reading, well lit, but not too comfortable, right? If the first time you're cracking open your book is when you're going to bed at night, you're very likely to fall asleep pretty quickly, and most of the time you barely remember the passages that you managed to get through before you fell asleep. I speak from experience there. So yeah, and then the other thing is, this is really critical. Don't be afraid to stop reading, right? So if you're not finding the book is keeping your attention and motivating you, right? Getting you excited again about reading, just stop, right? Life's too short. So, if you feel sort of some obligation to plod through a book that you're not really enjoying, it's not likely to motivate you to pick up another book. So, and that's the whole point, right? Is we feel like we're getting something out of this. It could be pure entertainment. It could be engaging you emotionally, intellectually. It could be expanding your horizons, learning about human nature, whatever it is, right? You're reading because you feel like you get something out of it that you really treasure. So that's what's really important. Yeah. So, as I mentioned, many of us have seen our attention spans shortened dramatically with these devices and screens that we're often glued to for far too many minutes or hours of the day. And so I thought it might be of interest to start out by just mentioning a few short books that I've read and enjoyed recently. So these are books that don't require a huge time investment, and they may give you a payoff, in the interim while you're sort of building back your reading attention span. So these are all short novels or novellas, some of them with a speculative fiction element. It's something that I enjoy. If you're not a science fiction reader, I wouldn't shy away from these titles because this is not hard science fiction. The science part of it is sort of really just a device for the story or a backdrop. These are really just, I think, really good, well-written stories. Yeah. So, if you're a nonfiction reader, fantastic. Look for some nonfiction that you think is going to suck you in to the story. I love fiction. Another new booktuber, and my gosh, I'm so sorry, but her name escapes me now. Just recently started and used this Camus quote where he said, "Fiction is the lie through which we tell the truth," which I really like. And so I would extend that to speculative fiction in that it is, the authors are creating other worlds to better understand our own, right? They're devices to really examine human nature and the way our particular world works. Okay, so let's get to some books. All right, so first up, is a beautiful, beautiful book. It's called "This Is How You Lose the Time War" by Amal El-Mohtar and Max Gladstone. And yeah, can't say enough about this book. It's a very short book, so you don't want to say too much about plot. I mean, it's an epistolary novel, so it's told in a series of correspondence between the two characters who are rival agents in alternative futures, which is where the time war in the title comes from. So, they're sent back to different times and places to try to slightly alter events to sort of tip the scales in their society's favor. And then, often the other side will sort of undo what one side has done. And so these two rival agents essentially kind of leave taunting messages to each other, and it goes on and develops from there. So if you're not a science fiction reader, put that premise aside. This is essentially a love story, and it's just achingly beautifully written. I don't know how else to say it. It's almost some of the prose is almost poetry. And what's even more impressive to me is that it's a collaboration. So each author wrote one character in this short novel. Just beautiful. I understand the backstory of its rise to popularity, which was a little bit after the time it was first published. Was, I think, some social media influencer basically went on and said, "Don't ask any questions, just read this book," and people did. And I'm glad they did, because that's how it came to my attention. So Claire Keegan, fantastic Irish author. I'll extrapolate from my experience and say you probably can't go wrong with anything she's written. But I read Small Things Like These. There's currently a movie adaptation out that Cillian Murphy made, which I haven't seen. But the novella is just really exquisite. It's heartbreaking, fictional story, but based on, real events in Ireland. Part of a shameful history, the Magdalen laundries. And I'll leave it there. Claire Keegan she has a very spare style. And most of her works are pretty short. But boy, do you feel everything in these stories. The other one that I read by her is Foster. It's about a young girl whose impoverished family is just overwhelmed with a baby on the way, and ask relatives to let their oldest daughter stay with them for a while. Just to ease their burden. Another really poignant story. I'm pretty sure there was an adaptation of it. I'm not sure. I don't think it shared the title, and I think it was noteworthy because the dialogue in the movie, I think, is all Irish, not English. Both just really beautiful, not novellas, really. I think Foster might be under 100 pages, so you can get through these pretty quickly, even if your reading attention span hasn't quite expanded yet. read the ebooks there, so I'll just put up the covers. Another ebook I read was Sea of Tranquility by Emily St. John Mandel. She also wrote Station 11, which people may know, which had an adaptation, like a mini-series adaptation, I think. Haven't read that. This is my first book by Emily St. John Mandel. Really engaging writing style. Read through this short novel very quickly. Won't go into much of the plot, but it's one of these stories that has characters in very different times, from I think the 19th century to essentially present day to the future, where there are some people living in colonies on the moon, and there's something that connects these characters across time. And I have to say, I'm kind of a sucker for those kinds of plots and those tropes, but very, very well done. I thought really enjoyable read. So back to ink and paper. The next book is Giovanni's Room by James Baldwin. Another author I would read anything by James Baldwin. Just really lush, prose, but it's just heartbreaking. It's a tragedy, but some people don't like to get sad when they read, and that's perfectly fine. I just feel like human experience encompasses the good, the bad, the ugly, and sometimes it's can be cathartic to read stuff that's really difficult. And this is difficult. Yeah. So, essentially deals with a man who's struggling. You have to remember when James Baldwin was writing in the 50s and 60s, as an out, gay black man, which was extremely courageous. And this is a story of a man who's, expat who's living in Paris, and his fiance is spending some time away. They think they're both trying to decide how, whether they want to sort of really go forward with things. And he's really struggling with his sexuality. And it's just heartbreaking. It's all about, societal pressures and shame and self-loathing that comes with it. And, and just the consequences of not being true to yourself. But heartbreaking as it is, highly recommend. So that's it for the short reads. I'll just briefly mention things that I'm reading now. After I said that I don't really read a lot of nonfiction, I'm reading The Swerve by Stephen Greenblatt from Harvard. This came out back in 2011, I think. I picked it up in an airport probably a couple of years after it came out, because it was already in paperback. Didn't really know anything about it because, again, I wasn't reading a lot. But I'm fascinated by this sort of period in history, this sort of medieval to Renaissance transition. And, some of the criticism I see around it seems to either come from people who don't think it's scholarly enough. And I think it was clearly written more as popular nonfiction, not as a scholarly thesis necessarily, or that it seems to be a little heavy-handed in its criticism of the church. But if you're an apologist for the medieval church, you got your work cut out for you. So I don't know if I buy either of those. I'm more than halfway through. I'm enjoying it. It's an engaging read, which for me in nonfiction is unusual. And he uses the story of a Vatican scribe whose one of his passions is to try to discover lost classical texts that were often, collecting dust in monasteries around the empire, or the former empire. And so, so it's, and the Swerve refers to how, things sort of took a turn, and, the sort of slow progress that had been made for centuries in social progress, artistic, scientific, suddenly started this boom that became the Renaissance. And I'm not sure if he's implying that this is the key event. I think he's just using it as an illustrative example. So I'm finding it engaging. If anybody has any comments about it, one way or another, I'd be interested. And then finally, I'm reading another short fiction, A Psalm for the Wild Built by Becky Chambers. This won a Hugo. Again, it's science fiction. She has two books. They're monk and robot books. So interesting premise. Not a doomsday. The robots become self-aware and kill us all. It's sort of the opposite. The robots become self-aware, and they don't want to have anything to do with humans. So I'm enjoying it already. So anyway, this has probably gone on a little long, but thanks for joining me. Please like, comment, subscribe if you feel so inclined. I'm hoping to make this weekly. Sorry for the long intro. That was really to just talk about what motivated me to start this, but in the future, it'll be more focused on books. I'm hoping you'll visit again. So happy reading.